Hey, everybody. Good evening. We are excited as we are back with our Kingdom Conversations. And we are excited tonight to have attorney Eugene Pettis. And we're going to talk about him and give him some shout outs. He is a major attorney in the United States. And we're just glad that he's in South Florida with us. Reverend Maria and I are two preachers in two different locations. I am in Atlanta tonight, and she is in South Florida in the home studio. So she's sharing this on her social media platforms. I'm going to be sharing it on mine as well. So we want to encourage you to come in and listen and ask your questions. And we're going to ready to be in this kingdom conversation on tonight about healthcare equity. As you know, throughout the year, we will do these. We've had several on wills and trusts. We've had them on finances. And as a matter of fact, the finance conversation went so well. We did it too on part one and a part two. And so we're just excited about this opportunity to share. And we're grateful that Attorney Pettis has taken out the time. We are both Heat fans, and so we were rooting them on to victory last night, but they fell short. But Saturday is coming.
It's coming.
We're excited about game 3 back in South Florida. So good evening, everybody. I'm going to share this, and I'm tossing it to Reverend Maria now.
Good evening, everyone. What a blessing to be with you all tonight. I'm excited about our conversation. Can't wait to sit at the feet of this great attorney that we have with us tonight, and to learn from his experience and wisdom. You know, I always ask that as you join us tonight, that you would put your shout outs in the comments so we can see that you have come into the room. Amen. So please do that, and get your questions ready so that we can have a lively and engaging and informative conversation. And I don't remember if Pastor said it or not, but if you would like to have your questions or shared anonymously, just go ahead and give one of us a text message and we will get your question asked. And good evening, everyone.
All right, and I have shared this, and I am excited. We have internationally known attorney Eugene Pettis with us, who is the first person kissed by nature's son to be the president of the Florida Bar Association. Did I get that right, Attorney Pettis?
You did, absolutely.
Okay. And so we are grateful. He is a high-powered attorney, and we're excited about this conversation tonight that we're going to have on healthcare equity. I have been pastoring 20 plus years, and I have gone to the hospital with several members, and sad to say, some of those members who've gone to the hospital did not leave alive. They passed, and we found out there were issues with the healthcare system. And so I had no one to call. And so I'm grateful for his pastor, my good friend, my brother, the Reverend Dr. Marcus Davison, who connected us. And so I'm praying that I don't have to have this experience again with a member and a family. But if we do, now we have someone to call that can help us navigate what can we do, not to bring that family member back, but to address some of the issues that happened on the hospital's watch, the doctor, the nurses, all of the people in the healthcare industry who may have dropped the ball. And so who made some errors. And we all are human, we make mistakes, but when lives are at stake, we need everybody to make sure they dot every I and they cross every T. So Attorney Pettis is going to talk to us about that tonight. We're going to have a lively discussion about it. Again, as Rev Maria said, please share this on your social media platforms and drop your questions in the chat, or you can send us a text. Let me introduce Attorney Pettis. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Pastor White and Reverend Maria, and to the entire audience of Emmanuel Temple and the greater community that we have today. It's indeed an honor to have this conversation, because one of the things that I've noticed on Monday, the 1st, I started my 38th year as a lawyer. I've been in Fort Lauderdale, born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. So I haven't made it very far, but this is home. And from the day I came here back home on May 1st of 1985, I've been really engaged in the community. I just think that that's a part of what we're supposed to do on this journey on this earth, to try to make our community better. And one of the things that I've noticed, because my practice has always been heavily in the medical malpractice arena, I've been on both sides. I represented hospitals for a number of years, and I'm representing now exclusively families and individuals in medical malpractice, wrongful death, personal injury type cases. And what I've seen are so many tragedies that, in all honesty, should not have happened. Healthcare can't save everybody. There are certain conditions that, unfortunately, death is going to be the likely result. But what you see too often is where it's unexplainable, inexcusable incidents that are happening that's leading to the death of our people. And I focus on that because there's been many studies that have been done around this country as well as internationally about the lack of healthcare equity. Anytime we talk about equity, so often people that are by society's views are marginalized, either by income, by race, by the community which they live in, social economic issues. They get stereotyped and marginalized. And what I want to do today is to, one, highlight that this is not a new issue. Dr. Martin Luther King stated, all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and most inhumane. That's over 50 years ago that Dr. Martin Luther King said that the most shocking and the most inhumane of all the inequalities that we see in society. And you know, from our own eyes, but certainly the path that Dr. King walked in his social justice, civil rights movement, there are a lot of inequities and inequalities in our society, and still are inequalities in our society. So this is not something new. We've been dealing with this for a long time, and unfortunately, I don't think that we've kept the conversation going long enough. When you look at proven statistics, indisputable statistics, you see people of color in the healthcare system heavily on the bad side of all statistics versus other populations. You see men versus women. There's gender bias, and there are extra biases when you have an African American or a woman of color. There are biases. So many studies have shown how our women and our mothers and sisters are expected to carry more of a pain threshold than other people. So when they come in and complain of pain, it's not taken as seriously as some of their white counterparts are taken when they come in for pain. When you look at high blood pressure, it's 50% more common in Black adults compared to whites and Hispanics. Breast cancer frequency, white females are more likely to get accurate assessments than Black females. If there's a downside to any of the statistics, you see us coming up on the short end of those statistics. And that's been proven. Sometimes you'll run into people and they'll say, well, it's a social economic issue. But what we see is the inequality in the delivery of healthcare is based on race, age, ethnicity, gender, and sometimes religion. And it's discrimination, exclusion. And those are things that I wanted to share. Just a few examples of how
So,
we manifest.
Attorney
Pastor White?
Attorney Pettis, you make great points that in this proven data that we have these issues because of several factors: race, gender, class, religion. And so in this multicultural place that we live in called South Florida, we still have these glaring statistics that are showing that regardless if you live in Weston or West Park, if you look like us, then it doesn't matter what zip code you're in. If you're going to the hospital, you may be not treated fairly or misdiagnosed simply because your skin color has been kissed by nature's son.
Absolutely. You're absolutely. And not only is that
Wow.
a believed fact, it's a proven fact. The stereotypes that are in the healthcare system are palpable. I'm going to run through just a couple of them, not what I heard, but what I know. Cases I have litigated and won. 18-year-old young lady, African-American, obese, she's 18 years old, has a 10-month-old baby. She goes into the hospital and she's her own historian. She's talking about the fact that she's having excruciating headaches. They say, well, you have hypertension. She hadn't had hypertension, but one time it was during her pregnancy with preeclampsia. But they say you have hypertension. The hypertension did not explain the headaches. When she came back, she was there on day one. She came back the next day. The headaches were worse, and now she's having pain in different parts of her body. Her mentation changes are occurring. And they say you still have the hypertension. Nobody's looking beyond the first anchor. And we call it an anchor. When you lock in, the first doctor says you have X. And nobody does an independent evaluation outside of that box, even if the symptoms are no longer explained by the first diagnosis, in her case, hypertension. She came back the second time showing mental changes. She's not as alert and oriented as she was yesterday. That should be a warning sign right there that it's something more than hypertension. What happens to this 18-year-old young lady? She goes home and she left the hospital about 1:30 a.m. on the 3rd of June. And over the next day, she felt she was getting worse. She says, Mom, I have to get back to the doctor. Something's not right. Now her mentations are totally out of sync. They thought she may have taken some overdose of the medication she was given. She comes in the hospital. This person that walked in and was own historian on June 2nd, on June 5th, she's out of it. So what do? Now they have in their record, because you can pull up the second, third, and the current, and they know how this has progressed neurologically. What do? They say she needs to be Baker Act. Well, Baker Act is not going to explain what's causing it. Baker Act is not the place to send her. They put that young lady in a psych facility at one of our area hospitals. Wow. And she deteriorated, and they totally missed the diagnosis of what was causing her mental changes, which were bilateral vascular clots in her brain.
Wow.
And by the time they figured out she had already had an arrest and she died. Why? When you look at the medical records, Pastor White, a couple of things that are just shocking. One of the doctors put in there that she was brought in by handcuffs. And that's probably why her arms were hurting, because they bend their arms behind, and therefore that's what the problem of her complaints were. I said, where did you get that she came in by handcuffs? Well, that's what I thought happened. Well, why would you put that in the chart and you're not sure of that? Again, stereotyping, Black young girl coming in, she had to be brought in by the police and handcuffed. That's the type of stereotype that leads to misdiagnoses. And in her case, it was deadly. Another case that I'll use as a prompt, Pastor White and Reverend Maria, is a case that I just resolved within the last 10 days. Shocking. This is a person who was approximately a 30-year nurse, a registered nurse at the hospital she was going to. Just think about this. She's going to her hospital that she's worked for nearly 30 years. And she's coming into the hospital and she goes in 5 times, 5, during this short period of time. And she's telling them that she has sickle cell anemia, sickle cell disease, sickle cell anemia, as it's sometimes called, and I'm in a crisis. She's been in this crisis before. She's had it for a long time. She knows what crises look like and what crises feel like. But how did the healthcare system receive her? Well, the healthcare system, first of all, her daughter is a doctor. Her husband is a very intelligent man. Her mother is a 50-year nurse in Miami that spent a lot of her time with sickle cell patients. So this is an informed family. And they're telling these doctors from ER visit 1, 2, 3, 4, she's in crisis, she needs fluids. What happens? One of them suggests she may be drug seeking. That's something that happens too often to our people. They're drug seeking. Don't look at the fact that the woman is a professional. She's a nurse. She's drug seeking. And they continue to send her home, send her home, send her home, to finally, on the 5th visit, they get her in there, but her blood is 70% clotted. It's too late. Her systems are failing. She dies. A 60-year-old woman that had so much more living to do. They settled the case, but there's no amount of money that brings that mother back to the family, that wife back to the husband. And you see this type of stereotyping and looking at people. I was in Palm Beach today. If you had seen me in Palm Beach, I had on some work clothes, moving some things at my wife's mother's home. If I had gone to the hospital the way I was dressed, I wouldn't be received the same way I would be if I go in my suit. And we shouldn't have to dress up to get adequate and equal health care. But too often, the way you look, what size are you, the color of your skin, how you speak, you're put in a box. And whether they admit it or not, that's what you see. Why do I say that? Because I've seen it happen so many times. And that's the reason why we have to be affirmative and advocates in our healthcare, because otherwise we're victims.
So, Attorney Pettis, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, you go ahead, Reverend.
No, I was going to say, to your point about being advocates, before we get to a point where we're so far down the road that our loved one has hit a critical and even fatal point, how do we begin to advocate for ourselves? What are the best things that we need to be aware of? And then how do we not only advocate, but hold accountable? What kinds of things should we be keeping track of while we're encountering the healthcare system?
Great question, Reverend Maria. And this is really a critical.
I told you, Attorney Pettis, she was smarter than me. I told you she was going to have.
This is a great part of the conversation. How do we become better advocates and consumers, I'll say, of our healthcare? We are working. We need to look at it, because I know at my church, New Mount Olive Baptist Church, there is a number of older parishioners, a lot of people that are older. And my mom lived to be 90. She's been gone 10 years, bless her soul. But she had a doctor, and he was her doctor. And no matter what he did, that was her doctor. Well, we need to be better advocates for our own selves and our family members. First of all, if you are obtaining certain results, critical results, there's a scare in your life, and you've taken scans, and they believe there may be something, and you get that feeling. The doctor says, there may be something here. I need to get a CT scan. We need to have someone who'll go with you, because I can tell you from personal experience, when you're told certain things, as I was told, I had cancer, my brain is gone off. You start thinking about something else and you're missing the important conversation. Fortunately, my wife was there. So when you're in the midst of some critical health care, you need to make sure you're taking someone with you that can hear the conversation, not only hear, but to also ask questions, help you ask critical questions. One of the things that we must do is to make sure that when you're facing lifetime threatening visits to your doctor, serious life-threatening diseases, critical information is difficult to retain by yourself. Do not accept a medical decision that you don't fully understand. I can't tell you the number of people that can't explain what they've been doing in the doctor's office. They went there, they were diligent in going to their various appointments, but they don't understand. We got to make sure that they understand you have a right to ask questions until you understand.
Yes, I was going to say that I remember my mother had a bone marrow transplant, and I went with her to the doctor, and it was a very highly rated medical system. The doctor was highly rated, but because I asked questions for a living, when I started asking him questions, we ran into, in addition to, I'm sure, the stereotypes that you just talked about, but we ran into the arrogance of the doctor. When I asked him questions about, how many of these have you done? And what is your success rate in doing them? And he looked at me like I was crazy. Like, how dare I question him? But I would advise, and I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on TV, but I am an interviewer. And I would advise that you ask questions because the person that you've gone with is someone you love and care for. And that's not a time to be shy or intimidated. And if the person on the other side of those questions is going to have, in many cases, could have your loved one's life in their hands, and certainly their care, they are the primary person responsible for their care, ask questions, and then ask the questions, ask them again to explain it in a way that you understand. And sometimes it's like you have to ask it a different way, or even ask for an analogy, or repeat back to the person what it is that you thought you heard them say, and then see if they can make adjustments to your understanding that way.
Yeah,
and that's, go ahead, Pastor.
I think one of the things that I've experienced in going with members doing hospital visits, I often say, I need you to write questions down before the
Take
doctor
notes.
arrives.
Absolutely.
Take notes.
And then
Somebody needs to take notes.
Right. Before the doctor arrives, you need to write your questions down, because in managed healthcare, particularly, they're going to come early in the morning, and you have to be here early in the morning. They're not coming at 10 o'clock. They're not coming at 2 o'clock. They're going to be there at 7 o'clock making their rounds. So you have to be there alert. I have these questions. If you can't, then leave some type of note so your questions can be answered, and then you can start having a dialogue. And I think Attorney Pettis, you said it, we've got to get an advocate, and that means either a family member or a close friend that we have that can engage us to ask those certain questions. And I think your second your slide here, educating yourself. Everybody, my kids, when I asked them something, they were like, "Well, Daddy, go ask Google." You do, go ask Google. And so I think arming yourself with Google while you're dealing with a process can even lead to other questions that you may ask that Google can't help you understand.
You're absolutely
Google
correct.
can sometimes give you questions to ask a physician about a particular condition or procedure. You can actually find published questions sometimes to ask about that. I'm sorry, Attorney Pettis, please go ahead.
No, they're both excellent points. And the educate yourself is exactly what both of you just indicated. We're in a time where so much information is at our fingertips. If you think you're having a heart attack, you can say, what are the symptoms and signs of a heart attack? Boom, it's there. You run down it, and if you have these, You don't go to sleep on it. You get to the doctor, call the ambulance, but you have to take responsibility to educate yourself. And everybody's not adept at the internet and all of that, but somebody in the family is. I mean, they could be on TikTok and everything else. You can figure out how to ask Google questions, and if you Google it, it goes to some very highly reputable sources. Everything is out there. I'm not saying ignore the training and expertise of the healthcare provider, but if you come into the meeting or the consultation informed, you'll understand the conversation and be able to engage in that conversation in a deeper and more meaningful way. So it's very important that all of us as consumers take time. I'm a lawyer. I do this for myself. When I was going through my cancer treatment, every single thing that they told me, I would ask them. And you're absolutely right, Reverend Maria, that they use terms sometimes that we don't understand them. Can you please put that in layman's terms? Can you put it in some basic language? And if you get the doctor that doesn't seem like they want to give you the time, this could be a corporate medicine problem, because corporate medicine says you got X number of minutes in each room and you got to see so many people by the end of the day. So they're just running through numbers. If they don't pause to answer your question, you have the wrong doctor. There's not just, whatever our condition or problem it may be, if a doctor doesn't want to pause and show you the courtesy to answer your questions, get someone else. Don't go home as uninformed as you did when you came in, because at that point in time, that's when you don't understand your condition. You're probably not doing the things you need to do, and you'll see that doctor 6 months to a year later, and guess what? The problem's worse now.
Right. For those who just
engage.
For those who just joining us, this is Kingdom Conversation, and we're talking about healthcare equity with Attorney Eugene Pettis. We've got a question, Attorney Pettis, here. How can Black women who doctors historically treat as if they don't feel pain advocate for themselves with pain management in this opioid crisis era? A difficult problem seems to have gotten worse. That's a great question.
That's a great question, and it's a challenge, and it's a challenge because I think it's so much stereotyping going on in this particular relationship. You may not remember, but there was a doctor at the hospital in Indianapolis, IU, Indiana University, and it was the early part of COVID, and she was there asking for a very specific drug. I can't remember, they've changed the drugs, but whatever the hot drug was for COVID at that time. And her colleague, another ER doctor, said that she was drug seeking. She checks herself out all on live FaceTime, whatever, not FaceTime, live
Facebook.
on
Facebook.
And she had a whole piece on what was going on. Went to another hospital. They got her the drug. She died in a matter of days. She had what she thought she had, and she was questioned. When you speak to the doctor and you're stating that you have pain, do not let them deter you from that. I have pain. It's unbearable pain. One of the things I wanted to show was it's not just what happens to us common folk, it happens to other people. One of the celebrities, Carrie, could you put this up, please? One of the celebrities that we have is Dr. Henry Gates Jr. Henry Gates Jr. is the professor at Harvard. You may remember him, unfortunately, for he was on his own porch, and they arrested him, asking what he was doing, going in that door. Well, that was his house, and that was during the President Obama's administration. But he was misdiagnosed, and that's why he walks with a limp. If you see him, he has a cane now. because his doctor didn't believe his symptoms and sent him back home. Hopefully his mom was smart enough to get him to another doctor, and it led to a correct diagnosis that required several surgeries at that point, and he was left with a leg discrepancy. You look at, we just had Westmore, governor of Maryland, just won in 22. He talks about his father going in the hospital, and the doctor asks his dad in the emergency room, does he have the habit of exaggerating? Now, what type of question is that? Does you have the habit of exaggerating, and does he make up different symptoms? What did they do? They gave him some medicine and sent him home. In a matter of hours, he was dead. So we see this, and when it's women, so many of my cases, for whatever reason, have been Black females, mothers of young babies, infants, who are in there that are not being taken seriously in a timely fashion. And that's where you just have to stick with there. And if you have to cut a fool to stay in there, you need to cut a fool. Don't go home if you know there's something wrong.
About almost 3 years to the day, May 5th, 2020, I fell and fractured my wrist and my elbow. And the point I want to make is about pain and about educating yourself, because I ended up going to a highly esteemed medical establishment. They've been known internationally. But when it came to me, my pain was minimized. The specialist they sent me to, he was a surgeon, and I guess because my case wasn't super sexy, it was a fractured wrist and a fractured elbow, but there were no bones hanging out or anything like that. He kept minimizing it. And at one point, and I'm feeling pain like I've never felt before. And he told me, oh, it's just barely, it's a little bit more than a sprain, you know? So immediately, and then also the education part of it for me was when I came back later and spoke to someone about this particular health system. That's when I found, oh, they treat people like that all the time. They don't coordinate well among themselves, which proved to be true in my case as well. Because at first they didn't tell me that my elbow was fractured. They only told me about my wrist. Then I went back because I was having pain, and they said, oh, well, yeah, your elbow was fractured too. Why didn't y'all tell me that the first time? Why did they send me for physical therapy on that arm? And I had it hadn't even healed yet. So I'm doing the first or second session of physical therapy and having to stop every few minutes because I'm in pain. And then they come back and tell me, they come back and say, oh yeah, that was a mistake. You weren't supposed to be going to therapy yet. So the education part, to me, there are institutions out there. I used to work for U.S. News and World Report, which ranks hospitals. I understand recently some people are taking issue with those rankings, but if you don't find a national ranking, talk to people in your community, because your people in your community can know oftentimes from personal experience how we are treated when we go to certain medical facilities.
And we have, go ahead. I'm sorry, Attorney Pettis, go ahead.
No, I'll be after you, Pastor White.
For those who are just joining us, we are engaging in a lively discussion on healthcare equity. We've got questions in the chat. Please drop your questions in the chat. Those who are just joining late, Reverend Maria brought out the point that Google is a good starting point, that you can ask questions, but we know Google is not Jesus. Praise the Lord.
My point was Google can give you a list of questions to ask. To start you off if you're not sure what to ask your doctor about a particular procedure, or even a condition that you may be, or even a series of symptoms. You can get starter questions if you just don't know where to begin to ask about that. Or if you've gotten a diagnosis, here's some questions. Google can help you sometimes with questions to ask about that to follow up.
And I think it was Pastor White who said, to take notes. A lot of medical terms are difficult to spell. So if you go on Google without the right spelling, you're going to have difficulty. Ask them how to spell it. It's okay. It's not, sometimes we feel inferior. We feel dumb if we ask those questions. I'd rather be dumb and alive than too proud and dead. It's important that you feel comfortable walk out of that doctor's office, walk out of that hospital with an understanding of what's going on with your body, so you can do that for the research. Prepare some questions for the next visit. Ask the right type of questions. One of the things that I've seen so often in our litigation is you got sent home. You shouldn't have been sent home. It happens across our community. There are pressures on healthcare. There are cost pressures on healthcare. If your leg is hanging on, and if it's just hanging on, they're going to send you home sometime to, go home, because insurances don't want to pay certain things. You have to make sure that if you believe whatever your instincts are, if you think something's wrong, don't let them send you home. Speak up for yourself. Ask to speak to the nursing manager. Ask to speak to the chief of staff. Ask to speak to somebody else if you think the person that's speaking with you is not giving your true symptoms fair consideration. Ask questions. One of the things I know for a fact is so often medical records do not reflect the conversations that you've had. Medical records, they don't put everything in the medical records. I got a case right now. Both mother and daughter of a 95-year-old woman are both registered, not nurse practitioners, ARNPs, highly trained, advanced nurses, and their mother and grandmother died because the doctor and the other practitioner did not ask whether she had dentures. They intubated her and pushed the dentures down her throat.
Oh my
And
God.
the lady died. Now, these are educated people, but when you pull that medical record, it doesn't have anything in there about this story. But they worked for the hospital entity at years past, and they talk about how they're taught not to put certain incidents in the chart. You make an incident report. So you get the chart, it's silent as to what happened. But the incident reports that you don't get until you're in litigation often speak the truth. And we often get records that are clearly different than what we see in the chart. We've talked about taking control of your own care. That's an important thing. One of the things we must do is, in this day and time, everybody knows cigarettes kill you. So if you want to avoid some of the consequences of cigarettes, cancer, etc., you got to stop smoking. We talk about abuse of alcohol. We know the consequences of that. Overeating. We know the consequences of that. We have to eat more healthy. It's important that we do what we can for ourselves in our communities to try to increase our survival and take away some of the risk factors that come with bad habits.
Now, excuse me, Attorney Pettis, there's a question in the chat that might fit well right there. At
Okay.
what point during a particular diagnosis should you get a second opinion?
Anytime you're uncomfortable, you're not convinced that you're getting the right information, or you could love Dr. Smith, but you want another opinion. When you go buy a car, you don't always go and buy it at the first place you go. You go to someone else to see how they're going to price it. What is their view on it? And I can tell you many times how doctors handle a situation sometimes can be very different. One doctor wants to do a radical surgery. Another doctor says, we don't need to do surgery. I can treat it this way. The more information you gain by a second opinion, the more informed you are. So the person that asked that question, when do you do it? When it's a critical situation. If it's critical, if it's a cold, you don't do that. But if it's a critical condition that may involve surgery, that may have life and death consequences, that may have major impact on your life, take the time to get a second opinion. it can't hurt. It makes you more informed. My legal assistant just went through a major surgery a month ago, 3 weeks ago. She probably went to 3 or 4 doctors, and everybody was giving her different plans. It's amazing for the same condition how different each doctor would approach it. So she was able to go with the doctor that she felt most comfortable with, that she understood and felt was going to be her best choice, and she made the right choice. So do not hesitate getting a second opinion from the outset. If you're dealing with, I talked to several people when I had cancer, how it was going to be treated. Yeah, I don't just go with the first person. Get other people to participate in that conversation. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Don't be hesitant. You deserve being informed on what your options are, and then you and your family, you and your advocate community can make that right choice. You owe it to yourself to do that.
For those who just joining us now and those who've been with us, we've been having a great lively discussion. Please drop your questions in the chat or send Rev Maria and I our text, and we'll be glad to share because we have a person who is wise beyond his years and wants to help inform us and wants to help empower us, that when we have these issues, what do we do? So that's my question, Attorney Pettis. My family member, something happens to my family member, what do I do?
First of all, I so many times people have questions and they sit on them. If you have questions, seek able, proven legal counsel. If you think a family member has had an injury or death as a result of something that just didn't feel right. Mom looked good a couple of days ago, and I go back to see her, she's dead. Something didn't feel right. You can seek counsel. We talk to people all day, every day, free of charge. It's free of charge. And I look at cases. Sometimes our own in-house expertise, which have nurses in-house, experienced nurses. We have a network of experts in every field that we call and have, preliminary telephone conferences. This is what happened. What do you think about this, doctor? You get high-level intelligence from experts around the country at some of our biggest and most reputable institutions. That doesn't cost you a penny. Why not do it? And if the answer is there was no negligence, there was nothing done wrong, that could be a part of your closure. That could be a part of you getting through your grieving process, and you can put closure on it. That I lost mom, I lost dad, nothing happened. It was just her time. Just, it was their time to pass. Now you've satisfied that. But if you sit on it, there's a 2-year statute of limitation. If you don't do something within 2 years, then you can't bring the case. So you don't sit on it and 3 or 4 or 5 years later want to do something and come to a lawyer. It's too late. Lawyers don't charge anything unless they win the case.
Say that one more time, Attorney, for the people in the back and all the way upstairs.
All the way to the back of the church. If you have a question, call. My information is on the screen. Contact us at Halixer, Pettis, and Schwam. You see the email there. We take the intake. It's around, your intake is reviewed by 4 or 5 lawyers, not staff people, 4 or 5 lawyers. Just before I got on here, I was looking at some intakes from today. Some of them I'll reject. Some of them are just, there's nothing there. I didn't like the doctor. I don't like the way he looked at me. Well, that's not a medical malpractice matter. But if you think there's a case, call your lawyer, somebody who does this. I'm not a jack of all trades. There's, estates and planning. I don't do that. I'll send that to an expert. And the same for an estate and planning, a general practitioner, he or she probably doesn't do high-level medical malpractice. Call somebody that does medical malpractice and that expertise is proven. You talk about researching. Look at their websites. Look at what they've done. Look at the cases they've done. What's the reputation? Make sure you're making a smart choice because you're putting your family member and their case in that lawyer's hand. And I review the case. I invest in the case if it's a case to move forward. We put the money up front. You don't have to pay anything. If I win the case, I get the exact money I put in back and whatever fee arrangement we may have. I don't put interest on the money I put forth. If I put $100,000 and we win, I get that $100,000 back. You need a lawyer who knows how to. Sometimes I have to have hard questions because every case is not a medical malpractice case, and you have to be honest up front with that.
Attorney Pettis, that really, you've already touched on this, I think, but what you just said is a good segue to another question we have in the chat. What can you do if you feel like you've been discriminated against in your healthcare? And one thing I want to throw in there as a reporter, all attorneys are part of bar associations where they've been barred, the states that they've been barred in, and you can check the bar associations to see if there are any complaints or any other issues associated with that particular attorney.
And Attorney Pettis was the president of the Florida bar, the first person like us.
I was the president of the Florida bar from 2013-14. At that time, we were about 90,000 lawyers. And one of my jobs was public reprimands and overseeing investigations of lawyers that didn't do the right things, lawyers that didn't call their clients back, lawyers that didn't keep their clients informed. You are owed the respect of staying engaged, your lawyer staying engaged with you. You do not go to someone that's not keeping you informed. Tell that lawyer you're withdrawing your case and you're going to somebody who's going to teach you with more respect. It's really important that you're a consumer. Read the question back again, Rev. Maria, that was just asked.
What can you do if you feel you've been discriminated against in your healthcare? So you've already kind of covered that. Maybe we can tweak the question a little bit also by asking, what would it look like? Like, what are some telltale signs that would make someone believe that they've been discriminated against?
One of the things, and I've touched upon it a little bit, is they're not listening to you. They're not hearing you, and you can be talking to somebody, but they may not be listening to you. If you're talking to them and they didn't answer your question, they didn't move on to something else. Excuse me, doctor, I had a question. I have my back is paining. I have a young girl who had the worst headache of your life. If you put that in Google, worst headache of your life, what can it be? It's going to pop up that it may be an aneurysm. That description has medical significance. And if it's not an aneurysm, they still should check to see if it's an aneurysm. Because of the fact that if you wait too long, it's too late. It's too late. So if they're not listening to you, if you feel they're judging you, and that comes in different, Reverend Maria talked about the fact that when she was asking intelligent questions, the doctor was put off by it. You're questioning my greatness, my God complex. You got a right to question them. And I guarantee you, Pastor Maria didn't stop answering questions, even though he showed some,
That was my mama. That's my mama. Exactly. You're going to answer every question.
Exactly. And that's the type of force you have to come with. You're going to answer the questions. I got my 5 questions here, and I'm going to get through every one of them. I may have some subparts to them. Take your time. It's your health or it's your family's health. Your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother. Nothing's more important than you being there as an advocate for them. So when you see anything that feels uncomfortable, how people talk to you, the doctor who treated me for my cancer, when I got his name, they said he's brilliant, but he doesn't have good bedside manners. I said, well, right now I'm not looking for a friend. I'm looking for somebody to help heal me. So I can deal with somebody with a bad day if they're giving me good care. He wasn't disrespectful, but he was a little short. But I would stop him and I would ask questions. So everybody's not going to be the same personality, and everybody who may not be friendly may not be discriminating. But if you feel you've been discriminated and it's had an impact, one of the key things, and I haven't touched upon this, just because somebody may have what we call deviated from the standards of care, they've done something that doesn't meet the way it should be done within our community. How they treated you is not the way it should have been treated. If it did not cause injury, it's not a malpractice case. You see people run through the light. They got through there. They ran that red light, but they didn't hit anybody. Now, they may get a citation for it, but it's not the basis of a car wreck case. I've had cases where you were given a pill that you shouldn't have been given, but if it didn't cause some physical injury to your kidney or cause you to have some untoward medical event, given the pill was wrong, but it didn't cause injury. It's not only a deviation that the doctor has to do something wrong, but it's also that that wrong caused harm, caused injury, caused death. And so often we have that conversation because people rightfully believe he did something wrong. But after we run it through our internal and our experts, they say this didn't cause the death. The baby died because she was severely premature. She may have gotten a little bit more of this medication than she should have, but she died because at 20 weeks of gestation, 20 weeks of pregnancy, there's a risk in the best of hands that you're going to lose that baby. So every case, that just because something happened wrong may not lead to a cause, legal cause, as we have to prove.
Right, Maria, there's a question. Is there a network where we can find African American doctors that specialize in different areas of medical conditions? I think that there is that Google, but I think there is that kind of network. Am I correct? I know you're a reporter. You know, you covered insurance and other things.
There are definitely associations, and since there is a National Medical Association, which is the Association of Black folks, instead of the American Medical Association, I would get in touch with the National Medical Association and go up on their website and see if they have any information about doctors in those particular specialties. I know that when we were doing the conversations on mental health, there are websites that list directories of doctors, and many of them will have the doctors' faces so you can see who they are. So I imagine there may be that as well. And then another thing, since you called me out as a reporter on that particular question, I wasn't expecting that. There's an association for everything. So there could be an association for left-handed Black left-handed medical malpractice doctors, for all I know. There's an association for everything. So even that is something to Google. Whatever it is, the type of doctor you're looking for, and Googling that along with association and Black or African American, who knows, you might come up with something in that way as well.
If you put in to Google Black doctors of South Florida, Black doctors of South Florida, a list of specialists of color are going to pop up. And don't be afraid of calling one of them. I've gotten your name. I would like to speak with you. And he or she may send you to another person of color. We know each other within a community, but that's another source that's on Black doctors of South Florida, can be that database to the person that asked the question and others to start your search for someone of your community that you may feel more comfortable with and may be more knowledgeable of some of our conditions and how to treat them than the greater community.
Hey, y'all, for those who we still have some few moments left, to share your questions. I have this question, Attorney Pettis. So an incident happens. Walk through the process of once you review the case and you decide, okay, how long can that process be? Timetable.
It's a complex question, so I'm going to try to process, I should say. So I'm going to try to give it in a more simple form. First of all, act urgently. Do not wait. If you have a question, call. It doesn't cost you anything to call. Please call. Once that call comes in a matter of days, we've done an internal review and we'll get back in touch with you, whether we think it's something to advance. Many times people come with their medical records. Many times they don't have their medical records, so we have to ask them to fill out a form authorization so we can get the medical records, because the story can be compelling, but you have to look at the medical records in order to base a true analysis. That could be another 30 days to get the medical records. Oftentimes I'll tell the prospective client, it's easier for you to go by the hospital and get your records. You can go get them tomorrow and bring them to me, as opposed to going through an authorization that may take several weeks or 30 days. Once the records are in hand, we retain experts. Experts look over the case. That could take another 30 days or 45 days or so, because one expert leads to another expert. One expert may say, I'm an expert in internal medicine, but I think you need to look at, an infectious disease. I think you need to look at a nephrologist. There are often many subspecialists that are involved in a case. In Florida, a medical malpractice case must have what we call pre-suit. A car wreck case, I can have it filed by 12 o'clock tomorrow if it happens this evening. There is no pre-suit. File the case and get going. A medical malpractice case, you can't file a case until there is an expert affidavit supporting a pre-suit notice. And the pre-suit period is 90 days. From the day you send it, the other side, the healthcare providers, have 90 days. We both have 90 days to do informal investigations. Statements are taken. Unsworn statements are taken. Medical records are obtained. And that's for a 90-day period. At the end of that period, the case I just settled with the woman the nurse who had sickle cell anemia that was not appreciated, that settled in pre-suit. Before the end of the 90th day, they wanted to go to mediation. And we went to mediation and we settled the case handsomely. Every case doesn't settle like that. But if you get into the court system, which sometimes you have to get to the court in the court system, we have to go to mediations before we get to trial. The vast majority of the cases, 95+% of the cases, settle.
Okay.
And that's always been the case. If it doesn't settle because they're not respecting the level of damages that this case is worth, you go to trial. Getting to trial could be 2 to 2.5, 3 years. It's a long haul. So you have to make some business decisions, and your lawyer will go through that with you. If you have $1 million on the table, but you think your case is worth 1.2 million, 1.3 million, do you wait 2 more years? Because there's some cost value to that money in your hand today. And who knows what the jury will do a year or 2 from now. So you have to make some business decisions. And your lawyer, a good lawyer, takes you through those scenarios of time and money and expenses are going to be incurred. Because if you go further in the case, the costs are going to go up, and it's going to eat up the $100,000 or $200,000 you get. You may come out of there with $50,000 more dollars. Is that worth 2 more years?
Right.
No. So that's the process. That's a quick answer to it's a process, but there's so many opportunities to get the case resolved short of trial. And that's what a good lawyer works toward, getting that case resolved as equitably and reasonably as possible, as quickly as possible. It ain't overnight. You go to some of these car wreck lawyers that you see on advertisement, they have a matrix. They're trying to get extra. They literally have an algorithm of what they want to get out of every case, and they're trying to push them by volume. If you got $7,000 off every case and you got 1 million cases, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be in a medical malpractice case where somebody's pushing volume. You want a medical malpractice case where somebody's giving you personal attention. And that's what we try to do, where you know who you're working with and people are taking time with you in order to make sure you understand each stage, because this is a foreign experience to 99% of the people. They've never been through it before. And they're entrusting their life, their family's life, their whatever the issue is, to a lawyer. And that lawyer owes them a duty to walk them through every phase of that case.
Well, we
We
got
have
one.
one more question.
Go ahead, babe.
We have one more question, and I know we're right at time. And then I want to just get you to clarify, Attorney Pettis, the 2 years statute of limitations that's to file that,
Correct.
and that's so if it takes 2 years, 3 years to work through the process, that doesn't eliminate me if I filed within the 2-year statute of limitations.
Correct. And the actual, to get a little more specific, you're correct with what I said. It's 2 years from when you knew or should have known. I just looked at a case just before I got on, and one of the cases I looked at, there was a foreign object in a guy. He had some previous surgery and they left something in, and he had been having back problems and didn't know why. He thought it was something of age. Well, he had no reason to know that the previous surgeon left something in him. So the 2 years didn't start from that point. The 2 years would start when you learned there was something, when you knew or you should have known. When if you were told now that there's a foreign object in your back, the 2-year clock starts ticking at that point. But once you file notice, and then you got 60 days from the end of pre-suit notice, you file the complaint. The case could go for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. You're not impacted by that 2-year statute of limitation. It's only filed. But I encourage people, if you have a matter, don't wait. Jump on it. The quicker you jump on it, and if there's a case, the quicker you can advance it.
All
Did that
right.
answer the question?
Yes. So we've got a question, and then I got a question on the side as well. Attorney, how do you handle a medical issue with a family member when you know that the diagnosis or treatment is questionable, but your family member is okay? Good question.
Good question. I spoke a little earlier about cause and effect. Legal, something happened bad, but it didn't have a bad outcome. Every incident that happens in medicine is not a medical malpractice case. What you have to do is put yourself, how is a jury of 6 strangers going to look at this case? If you had something that happened that had you down for a month, doctor did something and I was down for a month, but now I'm up running marathons. When you get to the jury, you're going to be shown as a marathon runner. So whatever happened that month, 2 or 3 years ago, is somewhat minimized. And you have to make those hard calls. How is it going to play in the court of law? What is the jury going to think about this? But if you have a family member, sometimes people say they feel okay when they're not okay. And that's the dynamics of all human beings. They don't want to tell you they're bad. If the family member is truly doing well now, back to work, back to their normal activities, they were down for a period of time because of something that happened. What was the impact? What was the personal impact? What was the emotional impact? What was the economic impact? Did it keep them out of work for 6 months or a year? Those are the things that we look at to see if it's a case that rises to a threshold, because the one thing you don't want to do, you don't want to go out and get a lawyer, and I don't want to take a case and it's worth $100,000. I take my fee out of it, I get costs, and you end up with less money than I do. I don't want that case. That's not fair to the client. So we have to tell clients, mal cases, you invest sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars out of our pockets, because experts don't come cheaply. And you're sending them all of these medical records to review, and you're having conferences with people that charge you $500, $600, $700 an hour to talk to them. It adds up quickly. You have to make sure that the case is serious and of economic benefit, because litigation is stressful. It's stressful. So you got to make sure that it's not you're not jumping out on emotion when the end result may not be very much at all. And you have to say, was it worth it for you to be immersed with this burden of litigation for 2 years and you get $50,000? Why?
So, attorney, last question. In your experience, and you talked about healthcare equities, have you noticed that our doctors treat us differently than others because they understand our conditions, they understand us better than others? Have you noticed that?
I have a daughter who's in med school, one of my wife's daughters, and she just finished. She's going back on Saturday to starting her 4th year of med school. She raised her hand a year or two ago and said, why are all the examples you're using white males? How about some people of color? How about looking at putting us as a part of the case study? And that she hit on what's the problem. And there are studies out there that talk about so much of medicine is taught on white male. And that's why there are gender disparities, not just racial disparities, there are gender disparities because of the fact that all these doctors have learned about are white males. Why is it that doctors don't understand sickle cell disease? They don't teach it. They don't teach it. So when you have a patient that comes in, and Pastor White, you remember when we were at the luncheon talking about healthcare disparities, one of the other pastors, I didn't even raise it. He said, my daughter had sickle cell anemia, and the doctor told us that she was drug seeking. The identical thing that happened in my case. So, when you have people of color involved, not exclusive, but you bring a certain sensitivity to the table because there's more of a commonality of experiences. Not that you have to have all Black doctors, all Hispanic doctors, but there's somewhere on your menu of healthcare providers, someone who's from your community that understands you, understands your background, sensitive to some of the diseases that are unique to us. Unique to us. And there's a book out talking Black doctor in a white coat. Black doctor in a white coat. And it goes through, this is a doctor who's now been in practice, I think about 10 or more years. But he talks about the experience of being in the room and how it made him cringe to see how our people were being treated, being in the room. So much of what our people do is use ERs for their primary care. So much of what our people do is use acute care facilities, which is another emergent type facility for our primary care. And they are numbers. Get them out. The algorithm in an ER is there anything like that? And if not, pass them on. Get them out. And that's why sometimes they get them out so quickly they miss the underlying disease process. We got to make sure that we are getting to real primary care physicians, internal medicine doctors who are trained to look deeper than an emergency doctor who's there for just urgent care, not detailed ongoing care.
Well, Attorney Pettis, you have empowered us tonight. You've educated us. You've informed us. You've inspired us. And again, as he said earlier, that there's nothing wrong with asking questions and sitting down with an attorney so it can hear what you have to say, and then it can inform you how to move forward and in what direction. And you have tremendously blessed us. Your information is there. I want to encourage you to text someone to invite them to become a part of this conversation, that they may go back and check it out later. And please, if you have questions, see an attorney. Attorney Pettis's information is there for you for medical malpractice. Now, they are not the throw everything up on the wall attorney. If you get in an accident, that's not they are not the people to call. They are medical malpractice attorneys, and he specializes in that area, and he wants to help people who look like us, to make sure that you get proper, that you have a proper resolution to what has transpired with your family members or loved ones. Rev Maria, and then I'll turn it over to Attorney Pettis. Anything else you want to share? Rev Maria?
Thank you so much, Attorney Pettis, for all of the wisdom that you shared with us and for being so candid with us and so straight up with us. And I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you for your comments. There were lots of good comments, lots of affirmation too of the information that was shared tonight. So I want to thank those who are coming from that vantage point as well, who shared in this conversation tonight.
Again,
Attorney Pettis, one of our members said he met the author of the book you quoted in Columbia, South Carolina.
wow, that's great. That's awesome. It's a great book, and it's a sad testimony, but one that we need to confront on this healthcare disparity issue. I want to thank you, Pastor White. You've been a role model, as well as Pastor Maria. You all have confronted an issue that our churches, as the center point of our communities, must confront. Don't let this be the last conversation. We need to continue to keep this among our ministries of our agendas for our ministries. There are things that we can teach our congregants to help lift them up, to not be victims unnecessarily. And I commend you for taking such a leadership position. Your handling of this issue is a model for many to follow. So thank you very much. And to all that attended this, if I could be of any assistance, it doesn't cost anything to call us. We cover all of South Florida and all of Central Florida, going across to the West Coast. So don't hesitate for catastrophic injuries, medical malpractice cases. I've done it for nearly 40 years, and my record is out there as far as the quality that we brought and some closure in tough situations, making healthcare providers accountable for the wrongs that they've done that had consequences, sometimes death, to innocent individuals. So I thank you all for being a part of this conversation. Thanks again, Pastor White and Reverend Maria.
I want to thank the tech team from behind the scenes, taking care of everything and slides, and we are grateful for you. I want to thank all of our those who joined us tonight. We are grateful, and we look forward to the next Kingdom Conversation. So stay tuned. The Lord is dropping things in my spirit now about the next Kingdom Conversation, because we can have to continue to keep conversations going that affect us, that are helpful, that empower us, that we may be all that God has called us to be. Thank you again, Attorney Pettis. Thank you again, everybody. Tech team, everybody have a great evening. God bless.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.